the abandoned prison had always been a place of fascination for the locals. Located on the outskirts of town, it was a place that was rumored to be haunted by the ghosts of the inmates who had died there. It was said that their spirits still roamed the halls, seeking revenge on those who had wronged them. For 9 friends, it was the perfect place to film their next ghost hunting video. They had been doing this for a while now, exploring abandoned buildings and searching for signs of paranormal activity. This time, however, they were all feeling a little more anxious than usual. The prison was a massive, imposing structure, its walls towering over them like a fortress. As they made their way inside, they couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. The air was thick with the musty smell of old concrete and rusted metal, and the only sounds they could hear were the creaking of the old building and the rustling of their own footsteps. Despite their apprehension, the friends were determined to capture evidence of the paranormal. They had brought all the necessary equipment: cameras, EVP recorders, and EMF detectors. They split up into teams, each with their own area to explore. Some went to the cell blocks, others to the infirmary and the administrative offices. As they wandered through the dark, damp halls, they began to pick up strange noises on their equipment. Static crackled through their radios, and the EMF detectors went haywire. But when they looked around, they saw nothing out of the ordinary. They started to feel like they were being watched, and the hair on the back of their necks stood on end. Despite the eerie atmosphere, they continued their investigation. They had come too far to back down now. They explored the prison's basement, where they found old tunnels that had been used to transport supplies and inmates. They were filled with rubble and debris, and the air was thick with dust and cobwebs. As they made their way through the tunnels, they suddenly heard a loud crash from behind them. They turned around to see that the entrance had collapsed, trapping them inside. Panic set in, and they frantically tried to find another way out. But it was no use. They were stuck. The friends huddled together, trying to come up with a plan. That's when they heard footsteps coming toward them. At first, they thought it was one of their own, but as the steps got closer, they realized that it was something else entirely. They were being stalked by an unseen killer. As the footsteps grew closer, the friends huddled together, trying to figure out what to do. They had all heard the stories about the ghosts of the prison, but they had never believed in them. Now, however, they were starting to think that maybe there was something to these tales. The footsteps stopped just outside the entrance to the tunnel. The friends held their breath, waiting for something to happen. But nothing did. The silence was deafening, broken only by the sound of their own heartbeats. They slowly began to move forward, creeping along the tunnel as quietly as they could. The only light came from their flashlights, casting eerie shadows on the walls around them. As they rounded a corner, they saw something move in the darkness ahead. They froze, unsure of what to do. They watched as a figure materialized out of the shadows, moving toward them with purpose. It was then that they realized that they were not alone in the prison. There was something in there with them, something that was not of this world. The figure approached them, and they could see that it was not human. Its form was hazy and indistinct, as if it were made of mist. But there was something undeniably menacing about it. As the figure drew closer, the friends tried to back away, but there was nowhere to go. They were trapped in the tunnel, and the figure was closing in on them. Suddenly, one of the friends spoke up, addressing the figure. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice shaking with fear. The figure didn't respond, but instead continued to move closer. The friends could feel a chill in the air, and they knew that they were in real danger. It was then that they heard a scream from further down the tunnel. It was one of their friends, and they knew that they had to help her. They turned and ran in the direction of the scream, hoping to find their friend and escape the prison. As they ran, they could hear the figure following them, its footsteps echoing through the tunnel. They were terrified, but they knew that they had to keep moving if they wanted to survive. Finally, they came to a door that led outside. They pushed it open and burst out into the night air, gasping for breath. They could still hear the figure behind them, but they didn't dare look back. They just kept running, hoping to find safety before it was too late. As the friends burst out of the prison, they realized that they were not alone. The unseen killer was still stalking them, its presence hovering just at the edge of their perception. They tried to make a run for their car, parked on the outskirts of the prison, but the killer was always just a step behind them. They could hear its ragged breath and feel its presence just behind them. One of the friends, a girl named Sarah, stumbled and fell, and the killer was on her in an instant. They heard her scream, and they knew that they had to help her. They turned and saw the killer looming over her, its form still hazy and indistinct. It was like looking at a dream, but one that was quickly turning into a nightmare. The friends fought back, using their cameras and equipment as makeshift weapons. They didn't know what else to do, but they couldn't just stand there and watch as their friend was attacked. As they fought, they noticed something strange. The killer seemed to be getting stronger, its form more defined. It was as if it was feeding off their fear and growing more powerful with each passing moment. They were trapped, with no way out. They had no choice but to keep fighting, to keep trying to survive. But they knew that it was only a matter of time before the killer got them too. As they continued to fight, one of the friends had an idea. He pulled out his phone and started to record a video. He talked directly to the camera, explaining what was happening and begging for help. He hoped that someone would see the video and send help before it was too late. But as he spoke, the killer struck again. This time, it was one of the friends who fell. They screamed as the killer attacked, tearing at their flesh with long, sharp claws. The others could only watch in horror as their friend was killed before their eyes. They knew that they had to do something, but they didn't know what. They were powerless against this unseen force that seemed to be able to strike at will. The killer disappeared into the darkness, leaving the friends shaken and terrified. They knew that they had to get out of there, but they didn't know how. They were trapped, with no way out. As they huddled together, trying to come up with a plan, they heard the sound of sirens in the distance. Help was finally on its way. But would it be enough to save them from the killer that stalked them in the darkness? They could only wait and hope for the best. As the sound of the sirens grew louder, the friends breathed a sigh of relief. They knew that help was finally on the way, and they hoped that it would arrive in time to save them from the unseen killer that had been stalking them through the abandoned prison. But as they waited for the police to arrive, they began to notice something strange. The killer, which had been invisible to them before, was now starting to become visible. It was as if the presence of the police was somehow revealing it. They could see its form more clearly now, and it was even more terrifying than they had imagined. It was not a ghost or a spirit, but something much worse. It was a human, or at least it had once been. But it was twisted and distorted, its features contorted into a grotesque caricature of a human face. The friends could see that the killer was covered in blood, and they realized with horror that it was the blood of their friends who had been killed. They knew that they had to do something, but they didn't know what. They were frozen in terror, unable to move or speak. The killer seemed to be toying with them now, moving closer and closer as if it were daring them to try to stop it. They could feel its breath on their skin, hot and fetid, and they knew that they were in grave danger. Suddenly, one of the friends had an idea. He remembered something that he had read about in a book on supernatural phenomena. It was a ritual that was said to banish evil spirits and ghosts, but it had never been tested on a human. The friends quickly gathered what they needed for the ritual, chanting the words that they had memorized from the book. They could feel the energy in the air shifting, as if something were being pushed back by their words. The killer seemed to be struggling now, as if it were trying to resist the power of the ritual. But the friends persisted, chanting louder and louder until the killer finally let out a blood-curdling scream and disappeared into thin air. The police arrived just moments later, finding the friends shaken and terrified but alive. They told the police what had happened, but they knew that no one would believe them. They had witnessed something that was beyond explanation, something that defied the laws of science and reason. As the police led them away, the friends couldn't help but wonder what other horrors lay hidden in the shadows of the abandoned prison. They had uncovered something that should have remained hidden, and they knew that they would never forget the terrifying experience of coming face to face with the unseen killer. In the days following the incident at the abandoned prison, the surviving friends struggled to come to terms with what they had experienced. They couldn't shake the feeling that they had uncovered something that was better left hidden, and they couldn't forget the terror of being hunted by an unseen killer. But there was something else that was haunting them, something that they couldn't ignore. It was the nagging feeling that they had seen the killer before, that they had somehow been connected to it in the past. As they delved deeper into their memories, they realized that they had all grown up in the same small town. They had gone to school together, played together, and even worked together at the local diner. And there was one person who had always been a part of their lives, someone who had always been there but who they had somehow forgotten. Her name was Emily, and she had been a friend of theirs since childhood. But they hadn't seen her in years, not since the day that she disappeared without a trace. They began to investigate, trying to piece together what had happened to Emily. They talked to her family and friends, but no one seemed to know anything. It was as if she had simply vanished into thin air, leaving no trace behind. But as they dug deeper, they began to uncover some disturbing facts. They learned that Emily had always been a bit of an outsider, someone who had struggled to fit in. They also learned that she had been obsessed with the paranormal, spending hours researching ghosts and spirits and other supernatural phenomena. They realized with horror that Emily had been at the abandoned prison on the night that they were filming their ghost hunting video. She had been there, watching them, and they had never even noticed. And then it hit them. The killer had been wearing Emily's clothes, her favorite hoodie and jeans. It was her voice that they had heard, her breath on their skin. They knew that they had to confront the truth, no matter how painful it might be. They went to the police and told them what they had discovered, and soon they were led to a secret room in the basement of Emily's family home. There, they found the evidence that they had been looking for. It was a shrine to the paranormal, filled with books and videos and strange artifacts. And in the center of the room, they found Emily's body, surrounded by candles and incense. They realized with horror that Emily had become obsessed with the paranormal, and that she had somehow tapped into something that had driven her to madness. She had become the very thing that she had been researching, a ghostly presence that had haunted the abandoned prison for years. The friends were devastated by the revelation, but they knew that they had to face the truth. They had uncovered something that was beyond explanation, something that defied reason and sanity. And they knew that they would never forget the horror of confronting the past, of coming face to face with the truth about Emily and the unseen killer that had hunted them in the darkness. The surviving friends were left reeling from the shocking revelation that Emily had become the unseen killer who had stalked them in the abandoned prison. They couldn't believe that someone they had known since childhood could become so twisted and malevolent, driven to madness by her obsession with the paranormal. But they knew that they had to confront her, to try and understand what had happened and to break the curse that had been haunting them all these years. They gathered their courage and headed back to the abandoned prison, determined to put an end to Emily's reign of terror. As they walked through the dark and desolate halls, they could feel the weight of her presence all around them, the same presence that had haunted them for so long. They finally reached the room where Emily's body had been found, and there they found her waiting for them. She was standing in the center of the room, surrounded by candles and incense, her eyes glowing with a mad intensity. The friends tried to reason with her, to understand what had driven her to such madness. But she wouldn't listen. She was consumed by her obsession with the paranormal, with the power that it gave her. As they talked, they began to feel a strange energy building around them, a force that seemed to be growing in intensity. They realized with horror that Emily had somehow tapped into a dark and ancient power, a power that was beyond their understanding. They knew that they had to break the curse, to stop Emily and the malevolent force that she had unleashed. They remembered the advice that the old caretaker had given them, about breaking the curse by confronting the source of the haunting. They focused their energy on the candles and the incense, using their strength and their will to extinguish them one by one. As each candle went out, they could feel the force around them weakening, the malevolent presence fading away. And then, with a final burst of energy, they broke the curse. The dark and ancient power dissipated, leaving them alone in the dark and silent room. As they looked around, they realized that they had broken the curse, that they had overcome the malevolent force that had haunted them for so long. They knew that they had put an end to Emily's reign of terror, and that they could finally move on from the horror that had consumed them. They left the abandoned prison, feeling a sense of relief and closure that they hadn't felt in years. They knew that they would never forget the horror of their experience, but they also knew that they had overcome it, that they had broken the curse and found a way to move on. As they walked away, they couldn't help but think about Emily, about the girl they had grown up with, the girl who had become the very thing that she had been researching. They knew that her story was a cautionary tale, a warning about the dangers of obsession and the unknown forces that lurk in the darkness. And they knew that they would never forget the lessons that they had learned, about the power of friendship and the courage to face the unknown.